Force, we're now live.
Thanks, Chris. Welcome everybody to the Southwest Task Force. I'm going to start off the meeting with roll call. Attendance has been noted by the Deputy Clerk. I'm going to go over a couple of rules for the procedure of the meeting. I'd just like to remind the committee that our viewing and the viewing public of a few procedural rules for our virtual meetings in operation as efficiently as possible. The first one is all members will be muted for the meeting to reduce feedback. All web cameras for members shall be turned on. Staff will be requested to join the video meeting should the need to answer questions of members of council arise. Any member of the committee should indicate they wish to speak by pressing the raise hand button, basically what Chris told us, on the participant list screen bottom right-hand side. Clerk staff will lower the hand when they've been recognized by myself for their speaking opportunity. In the event a connection or service interruption occurs, and if that affects quorum of the committee, we will recess for up to 15 minutes to regain quorum. If quorum is not achieved, the meeting will be adjourned. Is everybody okay with that? Okay,
yes.
We move forward with declaration of the conflicts of interest. Members of the committee, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest or items appearing on the agenda? Okay, we can move forward. 3, the presentation of delegations. I don't have any, so there are no delegations or presentations for today's meeting. Items for consideration. So we're going to move to 4.1 on the agenda, the Southwest Community Center and Park Archaeological Update. That the Southwest Community Center and Park Archaeological Update information be received. Can I have a mover and a seconder to get the motion on the floor? We had Dean, seconded by Rick Weaver. So I understand that the staff would like to provide a brief overview. Are there any questions? So can we get a brief overview of what's happening with the archaeological update?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Brian Hughes is here to provide an update on where we're sitting right now with the archaeological update. So I'll pass it on to Brian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I assume that everybody has received the document in the agenda package that kind of outlined where we are. Is that correct? Has everybody had the opportunity to read the information? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
So as outlined in the report we've prepared, we had started the archaeological work in the summer of this year, and as of the 10th of December, 10th of August, it was suspended as a result of the site protest. So we have not had archaeological teams working from that date to today. So there has been no further archaeological work done on the site. We will have to, at some point this year, reattend the site. We need to close the site down for the winter and secure the items that are still on the site, and actually secure the archaeological digs that are still exposed and have them kind of prepared for the winter ahead. So at some point, we don't know when exactly, at some point though, the team from Wood will actually have to re-enter the site and finish that work off. So that's kind of where we are with the archaeological update that I can share with you at this time. If anybody has any questions, by all means, I'm available to answer them.
Are there any questions?
Yes, please, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Councillor Utley.
I'll raise my hand up through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Hughes. Brian, can you provide any information on 2 things? One is just a brief overview of what has been found to date with the archaeological dig, and secondly, what costs have been incurred to date.
Certainly, Councillor. Through you, Mr. Chair. The items that have been found are they're numerous. They're numerous finds on the site. Now, that being said, I'm not an archaeologist by any means, but it was interesting to hear the vastness of the site, the significance of the site, where it was located, the proximity of the lands, the rolling hills, proximity to the stream next door obviously provided great hunting and fishing at some point in time for the communities that lived there. The findings are dating back in excess of 10,000 years. So it's quite a long period with the artifacts they're finding. Now, if I looked at some of these artifacts, and somebody showed them to me, I might not know they're artifacts. It takes, the professional archaeologists to actually explain to me what they're finding. And some of the items they're finding are tools and maybe even weaponry that were used many, many years ago for hunting and so forth in that area. There were remnants of fire pits that were found, but nothing really beyond that. It looked like it was a nomadic area that people would maybe travel to on an annual basis, do some hunting, do some fishing, but not necessarily stay there on a permanent basis. But it is a significant find, according to our archaeologists. And obviously the time frame that we've been involved can support that. To date, with regards to the budget, we have probably spent in the neighborhood of $4.5 to $5 million on the archaeological work to date. And that has not concluded yet. So there is more to come.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So I have some questions that I wanted to go over in terms of the report that we got from Brian. The part where I read that, please note that the staff investigated the feasibility of locating baseball diamonds, obviously with the archaeological dig being what it is, in the location for the baseball diamonds, that you guys had done a feasibility study, I guess, as to what it would take in order to move the parks. I'm just wondering, with Steve Brown being in the close proximity to it, is there any plans in the master plan to develop Steve Brown Sports Complex to improve the diamonds that currently exist there? And what does that look like?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, there is actually plans in our current capital to improve the facilities at Steve Brown. Those improvements, and actually some of those improvements would have been undertaken this year, but as a result of the COVID situation, some of the capital plans, this one in particular, was postponed. So if everything continues as planned and we have no further changes for 2021, some of these changes will actually take place or could potentially take place in 2021. They include upgrades to the lighting on the major soccer field there, the enclosure, and the installation of lighting on the Blue Diamond at Steve Brown that currently does not have lights. So that design work has been completed. It's ready to be tendered. So it's pretty much ready to go, and it is recognized in our capital. The other project we're looking at for 2021 includes replacing the lights on the Red Diamond at Steve Brown. And in addition to that, we want to readjust the diamond, I guess is the easiest way to say it. If you've played at the Red Diamond, the outfield fence is kind of convoluted. It really isn't symmetrical to the diamond. And we think we can get better use out of that diamond by extending the fence back and making the facility much bigger. I know there has been a request for 300-foot distances for ball, and I think that can be met on the Red Diamond through the changes we plan to make. So there's not much we can do with blue and yellow with regards to dimensions of those diamonds. The yellow diamond in particular is going to be restricted. It pretty much extends to the property line now, and lighting will likely be problematic as there is a condominium complex, in my understanding, being built right behind it. So that could be problematic. But the Blue Diamond, for all means, yes, we are. The plan is to move forward with improvements as outlined.
Does the outline include irrigation?
Through you, Mr. Chair, this time it does not include irrigation for the Blue Diamond, but that is certainly something that could be considered.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Weaver, do you have a question?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Brian, so we're doing an archaeological dig. There's some significant pieces that I'm sure people are going to want to hear about. So is there going to be enough money in the existing budget for the archaeological to perhaps do sort of a story of like telling the story of the area and maybe using of like plaques or something in the area to highlight what was found, and just tell the history of the area?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, Councillor Weaver, that is something we have discussed. We think that is a great idea to identify what has happened in the past and give the people that use that facility an understanding of what took place, 10,000 years ago on that same property. So that is something we want to do. What that cost is going to incur at this time, we're not really sure, but I think it's something we need to include in the project and in the scope of it.
If
Okay,
I can
and-
add, sorry, if
go
I
ahead,
can-
Indy.
Yeah, if I can add, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Weaver, I did approach the consultant to understand if Wood has done community events for archaeological digs, so bringing people to the site and actually showing them what's the find. Children love that. Other cities have done that. And we were on the verge of actually planning something like that, but obviously with the restrictions of gatherings, that kind of pushed that idea off. So that is something that we were exploring.
Okay, thank you for that, Indy. And with the current funding, so are we in any jeopardy at all of needing to come back to council for additional funding for this archaeological dig?
Through you, Mr. Chair. The thing about archaeology is it's very difficult to predict. If you had asked me a couple of years ago whether we'd be into it to this depth, I probably would have told you no. But it's one of those things you really don't know until you get into the ground and determine how much further you have to go. So if you can imagine these square meters of digs, they have to continue digging until they stop finding artifacts. And that's really how they determine that they don't have to go any further. So we're hoping we don't have to come back, but there's never that guarantee. There's never that guarantee based on archaeology, because what we do know, we have to finish what we've started. So we have to take it to the extent and finish it. If we decide we want to do something different, we still have to secure, and there are still steps we have to take to secure the property. So right now, Councillor, I think we're looking okay right now, but I can't guarantee that we might not have to come back. I can certainly not guarantee that.
So I just honestly, I don't know how much of an appetite I have, let alone the rest of council, to put more money towards the archaeological dig. So in the event that has to happen, what I would like to suggest is maybe we come up with some options on what we can take away from the project to fund what's remaining. Because I think honestly, that's going to be the only way that we'll be able to move this forward. Because I just don't think there's an appetite on council to provide any more money for this project. So in the event that is to happen, are we able to get a staff report with some options on, reductions in the scope of the project, or some efficiencies maybe we can find to help fund in the envelope that we're currently working within?
Yeah, through the chair, we can definitely bring that back, Councillor. Just wanted to point out something that Brian did say. Once you open up the site and you found something, you have to take it out, and if you can't bury it. So depending on how much they have found or what's left, we would have to actually remediate that site. Even if we were to make a field, an open field, concert field, or whatever the case may be in that site, if we choose to abandon that the baseball diamond idea. But at the end of the day, we do have to take what's in there out. And I'm hoping that there aren't any fees associated with that, but we can definitely bring back options.
Because that's actually new. From my understanding, we were able to sort of cut and stop. We just wouldn't be able to put any city facilities on that site until that was completed, but we didn't have to actually complete it. So that's not actually the case now under the archaeological and under the legislation that's in place.
Yes, through the chair. So understanding our discussions with our archaeologists, that's our understanding, is that once you've opened up that find spot, you can't cover it back up. You should be removing all the artifacts at that time.
So should or shall?
And that's a good question, Councillor Weaver. We can bring that information back. My understanding is that you shall remove those items, but again, we can bring that back. Yeah,
if you could get some clarity on that, Indy, I'd appreciate it.
Certainly.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions I have, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Weaver. Councillor Utley, you have a question?
Yes, please, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much. Two questions. One, do we know if the archaeological company is using ground penetrating radar to determine where some of these artifacts may be. I'm sure that, and I've watched, I don't know if you ever watched Time Team or other archaeological programs where they use this technology to scan a whole field, and then they can see these certain lines and features fairly easily, and that's where they dig. That's part of question A, and the B part of that is, are they digging where we want to build, or are they digging the whole area that the complex is planned for?
Through you, Mr. Chair. They are digging based on the area that we need to develop based on our
Okay.
design model.
Good.
Okay.
Good.
So the other areas where we know there's finds, there will have to be some other steps taken to preserve those areas where we won't have people going. With regards to your first question, the process that I've witnessed is very labor intensive. They are not that I'm aware of using any kind of technology, as you have indicated, for probing the land, keeping in mind the finds that they're finding are very, in some cases, very, very small items. Even something like an arrowhead, it really isn't that big in size, and looks like, you know, a stone or you know, a sharp stone or something along those lines. They're finding hundreds and hundreds of these artifacts. My understanding is that there's a certain protocol, as outlined by the ministry, that has to be followed for these digs, and it's very labor intensive. They basically dig up the soil by hand, put it through a sift, screen it, look for the artifacts, and then move on to the next area. So, Councillor, I'm not aware of any technology like that that's being used on the site.
It's not new technology. It's been used for many decades, and I just wanted, sometimes that can help narrow down the area to dig, and that could reduce or might reduce the amount of labor involved. You know, if you're digging 10 holes and only one produces something, then you could reduce that redundancy by possibly using ground penetrating radar. And it's like a big old lawnmower that probes into the ground with radar, and then you get this map. It produces a map, and then the archaeologists can use that to say, hey, this place looks pretty interesting, or this spot looks interesting, and that can save a lot of time in these digs. So I just wanted to throw that out to see if they were using that technology. So thank you, Brian. Appreciate your answers.
If I can add, Mr. Chair, for Councillor Utley, there's the different stages of the archaeological allows for different types of work. So once you get to stage 2, you're in the field. It's a walking exercise. So you get rid of the grass, you let it rain for a few days, and then you walk the site to find. And then stage 3 is when you've located certain artifacts during your walk, but stage 3, now you're in these hot spots. And once you're into stage 4, I know we're kind of walking the line of saying we can say there won't be any other finds or there will be finds, but once you're at a stage 4, you know where the find spots are of the entire site that you've walked.
Good. Right?
So we can't say for certain, but these are the find spots. And in my experience and my discussions through Wood, you can actually create a buffer around these and carry on works outside of that area.
Yeah.
So the buffer could be anywhere from 70 meters to 150 meters, depending on what that find spot is. If we were in a flat terrain here, you could start grading and doing some work around that area. But because of the lay of the land here, it's very difficult to create that buffer and actually move things. I think one of the find spots might be on the future mound of one of the ball diamonds. So it's just the location and where we found it is troublesome in terms of moving that site forward right now.
Thank you, Indy. Appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, everyone. Are there any other questions? Can I call a vote to accept this report? On motion, we're going to take Councillor Wall, seconded by.
I'll second it.
Thanks, Dean. Motion carried. Moving on to 4.2.
Mr. Chair, you need a vote.
Oh, sorry. I thought, sorry. Can we have a vote on that? Thank you. All in favor? Motion carried.
Mr. Chair, if I may, our deputy clerk can help with the vote by counting the vote and then naming those who voted for or against.
Does he not,
It's like-
and pardon my ignorance, but does he not do that already? I just did a quick count on the screen, so.
I hope he did. So anyway, he can help with that if you need to.
Yeah,
thank
no, that would be great. Chris, you're there? Did you get all that?
Through the chair, typically we only have recorded votes if it's requested by the committee. For meetings like this, typically it's just by show of hands, and the chair can determine whether or not the vote carries. But if you'd like to do recorded votes, we could definitely do that. Typically, it's only recorded votes if somebody requests it.
Yeah, I'm not requesting. I think we just can count hands and then I'll say motion carried if everybody's in agreement with that. Yeah.
Yes.
Heads, yeah.
Okay. So are we okay? We can move on to 4.2. So 4.2, that the opportunity to develop phase 2 of the Southwest Community Center and park update information be received. Can I have a mover and a seconder to get the motion on the floor? So Councillor Weaver, motion to get it on the floor, seconded by Mayor Davis. I understand staff would like to provide a brief overview.
Certainly, through you, Mr. Chair. Staff have been asked to have been directed to explore this option in that fact that we're kind of in a holding pattern for phase 1. So it certainly makes sense to readdress phase 2, which really wasn't within our current capital budget, was to be addressed in 2023. But it certainly makes sense to push forward the design phase of phase 2, which we can certainly do. And if so approved, that would be initiated next year at this time. There is sufficient funds that can be made available to facilitate that within the capital plan. And what we would do is, what we would recommend is that the consulting team that we're currently using on phase 1 are retained to work on phase 2 as well. They know the lay of the land, they know the project, they've been involved since the beginning. It would only make sense to do that. But in order to do that, staff would also have to take a report to council to outline that and get approval to move forward with that direction. So basically, we're ready to do that. We presented that the information in this report to you. There's a conceptual plan already that's been developed back in the a few years ago when the whole project was being developed. And then we would work from that conceptual plan and basically just detail it to make sure that what was the desire of the day a few years ago is still in place, and basically just fine tune phase 2. Now, phase 2, as you recall, involves the sports fields. There were 2 sports fields that were in phase 2. I believe one potentially could be artificial and one could be turf. And then there were some park amenities. There was like a skate park, there was a playground, there was like a multi-use court and an associated outdoor hockey rink, or skating rink, or something of that style that was all to be incorporated in phase 2. So that's kind of where we're going with that now. And then we could obviously listen to any other suggestions from the committee.
And if I can just build on, that. So phase 2 is clear of archaeological. So I just wanted to indicate that. So there is an opportunity, which I was talking to staff about, of if, for example, we start today, start the site up again, phase 1, we're still looking at about a year out for archaeological to be clear. So why not in this time start phase 2 as well? And if the design is about a year, you're putting them both at the same time. There might be some efficiencies here from our tendering process of saving and completing both sites at the same time, moving dirt, et cetera. So there is an efficiency here, possibly seeing that if the archaeological can kickstart again. But in the meantime, if we can get this site moving, that would be, I think, really good for the project. The other benefit is that we're going from top of site down. So you won't complete phase 1 and drive over it to complete phase 2. So with phase 1 on hold right now, you have phase 2 and then there's a phase 3. So completing phase 2, you're not going to be starting phase 3 potentially and driving over what you've just completed. You can actually use that amenity as we move forward. So there's a lot of benefits of doing this. We wanted to present this to the committee for you to take in and hear what you have to say about it. But we wanted to present this option to you as well. The funding is there. I've spoken to our finance to get this going. It just needs to be removed from reserves and the contract. We'd like to, as Brian mentioned, source the contract colliers, as they do have the know-how of the project.
Okay, any questions on the floor? Councillor Weaver, do you have a question?
I have a couple.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So can somebody help me understand why it would take 12 months to do the design work when, I mean, it's all sort of, the designs are in place, they're already existing designs and they're plopping them into the areas. So it's not like we're recreating what we need for a sports field. It's been done, and hopefully, you know, any contractor worth their weight is going to have those plans ready to go. So I'm just having trouble understanding why it's going to take 12 months to do the you know, all the design work. So could someone walk me through that, please?
Yes, certainly. Through you, Mr. Chair. Keep in mind the design we have right now is very conceptual. There's no detailed design to it at all. It's just basically concepts to say, this is what we're thinking. Since that time, there have been many discussions about the conceptual plan and whether it would change, whether it would be altered. We've talked about different aspects of the fields, different things that would possibly or could possibly be the desire of the community. I think it would be wise to ensure that whatever we move forward with today is what the community still desires in the way of amenities in the park, and not just move forward. So we want to make sure, and it will take a few months to complete the detailed design for this phase, because, like I say, there are certain elements, there are multiple elements in this area. The outdoor rink, is it refrigerated? Is it just a pad? What is our desire? So the consultant will go, he'll prepare the detailed design. We'll want to make sure that it matches the budget that we have. And if it doesn't, then we have to once again adjust it, make considerations. Do we take elements out of it? Do we add more money if we're falling short? So there's a little bit of work involved in it. I think it's fair to assume it's going to take that time to complete it.
Okay, thanks for that explanation, Brian. I appreciate that.
Yep.
So you had said that you're going to need to bring forward a staff report. Could we just not do this with a resolution that we can draft up relatively quickly? I can move it forward. You know, I can have discussions with each councilor member individually to see if they would be on board with that, rather than getting a staff report, again, just to save time. Is that something we could move forward with?
Sure, you, Mr. Chair, I'm fine with that. I don't know if Indy or the clerk's department want to comment on that at all, but I'm.
Yeah, you know, I'd be fine with that. I just have to understand how the rules would work around that when we're removing funds from a reserve into this project. But if Chris can provide some input onto that, then I don't see any reason, when the funding is there available for exactly this purpose of this part of this site.
Through the chair, as long as the resolution covers all the bases that the report would, and it has the appropriate information, I don't see an issue with having Councillor Weaver take that approach.
So with that being said, then is there someone from staff that would be able to assist me with that resolution?
Certainly, through you, Mr. Chair, I would certainly be able to help you with that, Councillor.
Yeah, I would like to bring it forward as soon as possible, obviously, Brian. So if we could maybe put our heads together about how to do that after this meeting.
Sure.
Or maybe tomorrow or something, just to move it forward as quickly as possible, please.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions I have, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Weaver. Mayor Davis, do you have a question?
Yeah, I do. Thanks, Chair. Really not a question, more of a comment. And, you know, it's very unfortunate the archaeological problems we're having, and there's a component to it that's more than just archaeological, and that's the protest, right? So I, like Councillor Weaver, I'm very concerned about, for the residents of this area of the city, they need to see, and they certainly are entitled to have, a significant recreational asset developed sooner rather than later. So I'm all for moving up phase 2 because it doesn't have the archaeological issues. But a question for you, Brian, I hear what you're saying, which is, hey, maybe we better check with the community, make sure they still want the amenities that the conceptual plan has within it. When would you do that, and how long would that take? Getting an update from the community, what do you want here?
Through you, Mr. Chair. And I'm not saying it has to be done. It's just a suggestion that it might be one option that we want to do. Because if not, how do we confirm that the conceptual plan is still effective and reflects what we want today? And it might not be that in depth. Maybe it's just a matter of putting the plan out and just making sure this is still what everybody wants, letting people comment on it, whatever the case may be. I don't think it would take that long to complete. I'm thinking maybe a couple months to complete once we have something established. It could be similar to some of the other projects we have, where we have a few options and send them out there, and maybe it'll be quick and easy getting consent and getting opinions from everybody. But I just think, you know, and it's just a suggestion I'm making, that it's always good to know that the plan you made a few years ago is still accurate, because it's been a few years since this conceptual plan came out.
Yeah, I guess I wouldn't have a problem with that, except for this. If we're delaying it for a month or two, I mean, not a problem for this purpose. But if the delay for this kicks it into another construction season, I'd say, not sure. So I'm not sure how you'd. So Councillor Weaver is thinking, okay, resolutions this fall, authorizing the money to be spent, proceed with phase 2. I guess in reporting back to us, I'd certainly want to know that about that survey, let's call it. Because I agree conceptually, it makes sense to have the conceptual plan reviewed by the community, just as long as it doesn't delay it into another season.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I honestly don't think it will. It's generally part of our design structure whenever we go into a design phase of a park, a playground, whatever it is. This is pretty much standard practice for what we do. So we incorporate it as part of that design phase. I honestly don't see it delaying the project or delaying the construction phase, because it's going to take more time to complete. But I think at the end of the day, we're going to say we have accurate information. We've engaged, we know what we want, and we've all agreed on the plan. We've taken a conceptual model, we've refined it and made something great of it. So I honestly, I think it's a good way to go. I don't think it'll delay the project.
All right, thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mayor Davis. Councillor Hartley, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And it's through you to staff. Are you looking for a motion from the task force this evening to combine one and 2, or and I'd like to include Councillor Weaver in this, is would that be covered in your resolution? I just want to find out if something's needed at this meeting to push the process forward.
I'll say this, I think it's, Councillor Ellie is, I think it's like-minded councillors. We've got 3 of them here working with Councillor Weaver, get this thing into council, with a decision can be made, move it forward. I don't know if I don't think maybe does it help Councillor Weaver for the resolution? I'm not sure. I find it hard to believe that anybody would think it's a good idea to keep delaying phase 2.
So with permission of the chair, if I could answer.
Yep.
Thank you. What I think would be appropriate from this committee is for perhaps somebody to move a motion in support of that upcoming resolution, so we can show the committee is behind, and then maybe in the resolution that can be one of the whereas that this task force is supportive of doing this, And I think that will add a little bit of weight to the decision process when we're at council debating that resolution.
Okay.
So
I would move that we support a resolution.
Oh, I got the floor. Mr. Chair, I'll be willing
I thought you finished,
to
Councillor.
move
Yeah.
that motion. Move that
Somebody
motion,
just
and
go
I'm
through Bauer.
sure Mayor Davis would be pleased to second it.
So we've had a motion to carry this. It's been
What
seconded.
exactly is your motion, Councillor Utley?
It's really to combine phase two and one together. Indy has indicated there are, probably some opportunities for efficiencies in doing that, both in cost and in time. So that's
Sorry, Mr.
what I'm
Chair?
basing the motion on.
Councillor Weaver, go ahead.
I apologize, Councillor Utley, but we don't want to combine the two phases
Okay.
because phase one is waiting for the school board and we don't want to hold this up any longer. So respectfully, if we could just take away the combining of the two and just stick to phase two for this motion, I would appreciate
Okay.
that.
Okay,
Thank you.
So if we can revert back, Councillor Utley, you're going to make a motion to carry on with phase two,
yes, please.
and then it's been seconded by Mayor Davis.
Yes.
Okay. So I'd like to call a vote within the committee. All in favor of carrying this forward? So I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So motion is carried. So Chris, is that acceptable for you?
Through the chair, I could finesse the wording afterwards.
That'd be fantastic. Yeah. Okay. So we're going to move on to 4.3.
Sorry, Mr. Chair.
Yep.
I did have one other question if I could,
Oh,
please.
sorry. And you know what? Yeah, I got to go back to this. I'm trying to get ahead of myself here. There is somebody just in front of you though, Councillor Weaver. Dean Huff,
Absolutely.
do you have a question?
No, I have a comment in re-engaging the public in the conceptual design and amenities that we're have laid out thus far. I've been on this task force since day one. We engaged the public. We had the open houses. We had all the feedback. Now we're going to engage them again a couple of years later. I don't see the purpose of that. It's a duplication, and in my opinion, it's just a waste of time. And with COVID, we can't have the touchy-feely, the conceptuals, the playgrounds and the layout. You're just going to put it online and people are going to go on there, and it's not going to be the same feedback. You're not going to engage the public like we did a couple of years ago when we actually were face-to-face in conversations with families of 1, 2, and 3 and 4 kids and what they wanted to see. That's just my comment and, my 2 cents.
Thanks, Dean. One other question I see here from Councillor Weaver.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question around funding for what would be phase 3, so the actual community center. My only concern with moving phase 2 ahead is making sure that we have enough money set back for the community center. Because at the end of the day, that's the project that I'm really passionate about. That's the project that the ward really wants. So I just don't want to get to a point where we're spending all this money for phase 2 and then we end up being short on phase 3 and needing to come back to council for additional funding. So are we able to take a really high look at what phase 3 may cost us, put some contingencies in place, put that money aside so it's secured before we start on phase 2? I guess that would be for either Brian or Indy.
The chair, yeah, for sure. I think while we're crafting the resolution, is something an exercise that we should be doing. I know that the consulting fees alone will probably be in the range of $1.5 million for the design of phase 2. So I think it's something that we do have to look at, and while we're crafting the resolution, we'll bring in some updated numbers.
Okay, thank you for that, Indy. And I am in the wrong business if they're charging 1.5 million for a design, but
We all are.
yes. Okay.
Are there any other questions on the floor? Okay, I'm just going to make a quick comment. I kind of have to side with the nice to-dos on this are over. I was part of the conceptual meetings at the beginning of this too. I think that those design features are going to stay prevalent. If they need some tweaking, then we can do that. But I think moving forward, we have to. If we continue to bog this down, especially with everything that's going on in that area, we're asking for more hangups. So to me, yeah, the niceties are over. We need to move forward, and we need to move forward decisively. And I think we do that by moving forward with what we have, and we'll tweak it when it comes to phase 2. That's just my opinion on it. Are there any other questions on the floor? Okay. So thank you, Chris, for tweaking the the responses. I'll get this right eventually. So moving on to let's see here. So we're moving on to 4.3, the Southwest Community Center Park Timeline and Budget, that the Southwest Community Center and Park Timeline Budget update information be received. Can I have a mover and a seconder to get the motion on the floor for 4.3? So basically we have Councillor Weaver as the mover and Mayor Davis is the seconder. So I understand that staff would like to provide a brief overview. Can we have that now?
Certainly, Mr. Chair. Through you. So with regards to the phase 1 construction, we had made application for a federal infrastructure program grant. I think that was a year ago at this time, thereabouts. And we were not successful in gaining any money from that grant. So we were hopeful that some of these costs would be covered through the grant, but unfortunately that isn't the case. So as outlined in this report, you can see the 3 phases broken down and the budgets accordingly for each phase broken down with a brief explanation of what each phase encompasses. The current approved budget for phase 1 is $17,825,000 as outlined, with the original budget being approximately $11 million. So it's been augmented over the years. In 2019, there was 3.5 million added and another 3.3 million in 2020, basically all related to archaeological costs. So the construction budget has not changed. It's still 8.7 million and is on track and is current at this time. So the schedule, as outlined before, we've talked about it. We've talked about the delays with regards to the archaeology and where that is and when we can hopefully get back into the field. The design and tender documents for phase 1 are 97% complete. So it's pretty much ready to go. We're ready to tender it. We just need to get through the archaeological phase and then we're off to the races. So that's kind of where we sit. We're kind of anticipating if all goes well to be completed by the fall of 2023. So obviously still a few years out because we anticipate at least another year of archaeological work on the site. Keeping in mind, archaeological work is restricted to the window of the summer. They can't perform the work, obviously, in the winter. They can't dig on the site, and of course, the site is frozen. So you're limited to the warmer months of the year, and there are also delays that are sometimes incorporated with regards to rain and inclement weather. It also restricts what they can do. With regards to phase 2, which is the area we were just previously talking about, includes the sports fields and some of the other community park amenities, skate park, basketball court, multi-use court. We talked about a potential ice rink and a couple fields, one of the sports fields potentially being artificial. The capital plan is dated and is scheduled for 2023 with a project budget of approximately $14 million for that phase. You should also keep in mind that some of the infrastructure from phase 2 and phase 3 are shared. So that being some of the parking facilities, some of the parking lots, roadways, there will be shared infrastructure between those 2 phases. As far as phase 3 goes, that's the community center, library, and the school. Again, slated for 2024 with a project budget cost of approximately $11 million. It should also be noted that with regards to phase 3, we are not the lead on that project. We are the lead on the first 2 phases, But the school board, as it sits right now, the school board would be the lead on phase 3. That doesn't mean we wouldn't have input. We certainly would, and we certainly be involved in the process, but they would be governing the construction and the design. Any questions?
Councillor Weaver, do you have a question?
Yes, I do, Mr. Chair. Thank you. So Brian, I've mentioned this before. So if the provincial government doesn't give the school board their grant to build another school in this area, how long are we going to wait for that to happen before we just start moving forward with the community center? And I appreciate there's some cost efficiencies. I think it was 25% last I heard, if we were to build it together. And obviously there's efficiencies if the school board is the project manager rather than the city. But you know, the residents in this area have been waiting, 20 years now for a community center. So are we able to, maybe have some very high level discussions about how long we're going to hold out for before we look at this project and try to move it forward ourselves, with either having, maybe it can be connected via a breezeway to the school once it's built, or a knockout wall or something?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. Certainly, Councillor, I think we can have, any discussions we'd like to have on options for this moving forward. I know the school board, I think, is once again this year making application. They were turned down in 2019. I don't think they've heard back in 2020 yet with regards to application for a new school. Keeping in mind one of the rationale why we moved forward with the joint venture was it was going to be a bit of a cheaper option to put a lot of this, the building and the infrastructure together. There were cost savings with regards to energy consumption and other things. So, but that being said, it's only, in my opinion, it's only realistic that if the school doesn't move forward, and the desire of council and this task force is to get this community center up as a priority, we can certainly consider options for that. And that option, I guess, would be a standalone facility in the same vicinity as where we would plan to put it.
So how much longer do you think we should wait before we start having those discussions and making a decision? Is there a timeline that we know from the school board when they're going to get notification about the 2020 grant that they've applied for?
Through you, Mr. Chair. From what I recall, I thought it was always around the fall of the year that they received notification as to whether they were successful or not. I thought it was around this time of the year that they heard. I could be wrong, but I thought it was. And then with regards to your other question, that's difficult. That's a difficult one to answer as to when we can consider it. I don't know that that's a staff question to answer. I think it's probably more of the desire of council and of this task force.
Okay, thank you, Brian.
Thanks, Brian. Brian Hutchins, do you have a question?
Not a question, just more to add to Brian Hughes's response. If I can, through you, Mr. Chair, Brian Hutchins, CEO. That's item 4.5 later on the agenda, at least on my agenda that I have here, talks about the school board communications and who's doing that. So to Councillor Weaver's question, I think we need to have some formal meetings with the school board to see where they're at in their application process and their likelihood and those sorts of things. I don't think there's been much communication over the last year with the school board.
Okay. Yeah, I had it in 4.4. So yeah, so 4.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, I might be looking at old agenda, so you're probably correct. I have printed out something that's pretty old. So.
Okay, yeah, no, that's okay. I have a couple different agendas, so I want to make sure that we're all on the same page when what number we're at. Yeah, I have 4.4 that the school board communications, a verbal update. I understand the staff has a verbal update. Is there an update for it, or we're just kind of
Through the chair, could we just get a motion to approve item 4.3 before we go to 4.4?
Yeah, thank you. Sorry. I got too many pieces of paper here. Can I get a motion to carry forward about the 4.3 Southwest Community Center Park timeline and budget? Can I have a motion? So Councillor Weaver, can I have it seconded? Dean Huff is going to second it. I'd like to have a vote, please, with the community. All in favor of carrying it forward? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's motion carried. How was that verbiage, Chris? Was I better there?
Great.
Okay, good. 4.5, one of the things that we need to do is establish the next task force meetings. I'd like to get a mover and a seconder to bring this to the forefront. Can I have somebody make a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Councillor Utley was a little quicker on the button, but we'll have it seconded by, we need it seconded. Dean?
Yeah.
Dean will second it. So I would like to establish the next task force meeting. I think from my standpoint, the frequency of these meetings needs to be increased. I've never been one for having a meeting for the sake of having a meeting, but I think given everything that has happened or transpired out on the site as it sits, I would like to meet next month to start. Basically to go over what has happened in this meeting. It seems like it's a lot of information for us. But I would also like to establish every 3 months that we meet. Things need to start moving quicker. And I think that, you know, as a task force, we need to be brought up to speed as to what is happening and more importantly, what isn't. So if there's any questions that are on the floor in regards to that, we can take those now. So for the record, I'd like to start a meeting a month from now and then every 3 months after that. Is that Mayor Davis?
I'm with you about meeting not for the purpose of meeting. What would we hope to accomplish a month from now that we don't really know right now? I mean, we look at phase 1, and so phase 1 is stuck. We really don't know where the archaeological situation is until next summer, and that's not just weather, it's just also the political dynamic with Six Nations. But we're really not going to know much about that over the winter. I mean, phase 2 is really about Councillor Weaver's motion that he's going to be bringing, and council giving staff the necessary authority to move forward with the planning. So I really don't think we'd have much to report until I would think later this fall, maybe early in the year, when we'll know more about Councillor Weaver's resolution, and then, you know, and what staff are going to do to move that forward. And, you know, talking about a timeline for that. And that's the design and getting that off the ground for phase 2.
Oh, thank you for that.
So I would think it's really probably early in the new year. But, you know, if the committee wants to meet in a month from now, okay, I'll attend, but I'm just wondering what we'd hope to accomplish.
Yeah, I don't sit in on all the meetings. So as the chair of this task force, I'd like to be brought up to speed as to whether the motion's been carried. You know, and it doesn't necessarily need to be a meeting, but I'd like to see a report that, yeah, Jay, hey, this thing is moving forward. And I would like to see that in the course of a month. Does that make more sense than meeting? If the reports are produced, then, and if I can get that, that makes more sense than tying up everybody's time for an hour or so. But I'd like to see that in a report within a month.
Yeah, that's fair enough. And really the big news would be what happens at council, Councillor Weaver's resolution, and that would be probably the end of October, first part of November. So.
Yeah, and so that's right along the timeline of a month from now. So that works. Are there any other questions about the timeline of meeting? Okay, so I'd like to get a vote on that. Can I have somebody put forward?
Hey,
Well, so
through the chair, sorry for the interruption. Are we voting on quarterly meetings then?
Yeah, so I think that makes sense at this. So we'll do quarter.
Yeah.
Mayor Davis?
I'll move a resolution. How's this? So I'd move that we have our next meeting in January and then meet quarterly thereafter, and that prior to January, Councillor Weaver will give us an update as to his progress in getting the necessary resolution for phase 2 out of from council this fall.
Councillor Weaver? Actually, I have somebody, Councillor, sorry, can you address that, Councillor Weaver? And then I have another question on the floor.
Yeah, I'll certainly agree to doing that.
We need a second.
Making sure.
Yeah. If anybody's interested in seconding that, so we can talk about it.
I'd be happy to second that as well.
Thank you, Councillor Weaver. So we need to have a vote. Are we voting on this?
I believe, Mr. Chair, the meetings are at the call of the chair. I believe, so I don't believe we need to vote on a schedule per se, but I'm sure our deputy clerk would be able to give us some guidance on that.
Through the chair, the terms of reference do state that the chair can call meetings at the call of the chair. However, if the committee wishes to establish a schedule, they're also able to do that as well.
Yeah, I read that here, and I do have a question about that. The task force meetings will be ideally timed at the key milestones or at the call of the chair. I sent an email on the 2nd of September requesting a meeting, and then there was a response within 2 hours saying that we don't need to meet. I'm just wondering, and it was due to after consultation with staff that no, we don't need to meet. I'm just wondering who that was that said, no, we don't need to meet after the chair called the meeting. Can somebody kind of help me out with that answer?
You, Mr. Chair. Yeah, this was a corporate direction in regards to the COVID response and our task force meetings and moving forward with only legislative urgent items. So what had happened is when we moved into the virtual world, which we are currently in as well, the meetings that were occurring were for those that were of urgent matters. So at that time, when your email came out, I believe the first task force that actually moved forward was the Economic Development Task Force, and that was vital for our response to COVID. So you did receive that response, but again, speaking with staff and talking to our CAO, we know that this project had urgent items built within the project. So we did write back saying that we will have the meeting and hold the meeting. So it was initially it was a corporate direction, but again, we did discuss that, and now we're moving forward. Actually, we are moving forward with more task force as we move along through this pandemic.
Okay, thank you for that. Yeah, I found it odd that August 10th was the incident that we had out on the site. I asked for a meeting on August 10th, September 2nd, I asked for a meeting, and I'm told no meeting. It was a little bit disconcerting. So I wasn't sure, if I call a meeting, if it's actually going to happen or not. Is there anything else on the floor? So Councillor Wall, I see your hands up. Do you have a question?
Yeah, a question and a statement, but I think it's already been covered here. The motion that we're voting on right now is to what Mayor Davis said. And I'm just wondering if after the conversation that we've had, essentially you have the authority to call a meeting whenever you want. So is this motion still relevant? Not that it's not a great motion, because it's a great motion. You know what I mean, right?
And I do know what you mean. And I think I'm going to take some, I'm going to take some reference from people that do this a lot more than I do. If there's an issue or something that I need to bring up, I'd like to call a meeting. I just don't want to get an email within 2 hours that says, no, we don't need to meet. So,
so I think that, I'm sorry, never mind.
No, go ahead.
I think it's really a matter of, Councillor Weaver, myself, or Mayor Davis, I think will gladly help you navigate this process. If you were to reach out to us to ask, sorry, Councillor Utley too. If you were to ask any of us for any assistance, I think we would gladly be there to help you with the whole COVID climate and what's going on in the world right now. And I know that was before then, but things have been weird and it's been really complicated, and staff, I think there just might have been a miscommunication there. And at the end of the day, if you want to have a meeting, I'm sure we can figure it out.
Thanks, Councillor Wall. Mayor Davis.
Yeah, I would normally agree with my fellow councillors about, the meeting we call by the chair, but, in this project, there's a lot of frustration, right? Because it's kind of late in the doldrums, not for good reasons. So not that it wasn't anybody paying attention, just some particularly unique challenges. And so we're kind of taking a different course here. We're wanting to move forward with phase 2. And I like the idea of meetings every 3 or 4 months. And I'll tell you why, because it sets a timeline, right? For us, for staff, and especially next year early next year when I think hopefully we got council approval this fall. And we're really hopefully coming out like gangbusters on phase 2 and, dealing with phase 1 as best we can, but, really making significant progress in phase 2 and that timeline of every 3rd or 4th month, I think it'll help and keep it moving along and keeping it top of people's agendas. So we may decide in next year that we, as we get into it, maybe we don't need to meet every, 3 or 4 months, maybe every 6 months, but so I think it's a good way to kick off and try and get phase 2 like really off the ground and moving along.
And I would agree. And that goes back to what I said earlier about I don't want to have a meeting for the sake of having a meeting, but I think we do need to schedule them every 3 months moving forward. So Mayor Davis, you made the motion to have the meetings every 3 months. Do I have a seconder? Jen has seconded it. All in favor of moving to every 3 months, we'll actually have a meeting. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Dean, you're there. There you go. 8. Motion carried.
Through the chair, we actually need to go back to item 4.4. That was the verbal update regarding the school board communication.
Yeah, sorry, I got 2 different agendas here. So the 4.4 school board communication verbal update, I understand that the staff does have an update.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I believe it was more of there is no update. It's really I asked this be on the agenda, Mr. Chair, because in my year now at the city, I've yet to hear of any discussions that I know there's previous discussions, school board applying. We just don't know who the point is on the discussions with the school board. If you like it to be me, that's who was doing it the previous CEO or the general manager. But there's an absence of discussion about phase 1 and where the school board, if they're still interested and what have you. I don't know if there's many discussions that have happened. So not an update, Mr. Chair. It's very rare that staff brings something forward with a question mark at the end of it.
Yeah.
I do have a question mark, and I just want to make sure if it's not being covered, I'll make sure it gets covered off. But I'm using the excuse that I wasn't here when this is approved. I'm not sure who has had the discussions with the school board. And if you want me to continue on, I'm more than willing to do that.
So Mayor Davis, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'll make a suggestion. And I would suggest that Brian and I, meet with what do they call them? Not the executive director of the school, the superintendent, and also the board chair. And let's call for a meeting, Brian. And we probably overdue to meet with them anyways, just, and I think this way we can, if you and I ask for it, it'll convey, that we're really wanting this to move forward and maybe cause them to redouble their efforts. So let's do that. I'm happy to do that.
Okay, that answers the question. I'm again apologize, Mr. Chair. Usually bring substantive stuff, but that's a question mark. I think that's the committee so wishes. The mayor and I will have a meeting with the school board director and as well as their chair to see their interest in carrying forward on this project and their application process.
Thanks, everybody. Chris, is there anything else that we need to do with this?
Through the chair, no, you don't.
Thank you, sir. So moving forward, consent. May I please have a mover and a seconder for the minutes? So mover was Councillor Weaver, seconded by Dean. So the minutes from the Southwest Task Force, November 7th. Is there anything else that needs to be done with this, Chris?
Through the chair, if there's any errors or omissions, this is the point in time where members of the committee would bring that forward. If not, a motion to approve the minutes, which is already on the floor. So basically just calling of the vote.
Okay, so I'd like to call a vote to approve the minutes from November. Moved by Councillor Wall, seconded by Councillor Utley. So I'd like to vote on this. All in favor of moving to accept? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7,
Sorry.
8.
Jay, Chair.
Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Wall.
I can't move that. I wasn't present at the meeting.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I did count your hand, did I not? Okay. Councillor Weaver.
I'll just be happy to move that as well in response to Councillor Wall's previous comment.
Okay, thank you. So moving on here, we have 6 notices of motion. There are no notices of motion for today's meeting. So what I'd like to do is move to an adjournment. I guess we need to make a motion to adjourn the meeting. Somebody like to make a motion? Councillor
Mr.
Utley?
Chair,
Yes.
Sorry, did we actually get a vote for the minutes?
I thought we did. If we did not, then we can
Okay.
go back.
Okay, and as adjournment, as the chair, you don't require a motion for adjournment.
Great. So I can just end it.
So- Correct.
So, yeah, and I got to apologize. I'm not used to the formality of these meetings. Normally, when I'm in my boardroom, I just say, okay, adjourned. So,
No problem.
without further ado, everyone, thank you for joining us for tonight's meeting. And I look forward to the next one. So I'd like to adjourn the meeting moving forward. Thanks, everyone.